Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap Up, our deep dive into the big issues from this month's County Board meeting. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and today we're chatting with, as always, County Board Chair Matt DeFerranti, as well as Board Member Libby Garvey. Thank you both for joining us today. Now let's get right to the big issue with no delay, of course, the adoption of the fiscal year 2022 budget. Now, in approving the budget, the board voted to keep the tax rate at its same level, which has raised a few questions, especially as some property assessments have increased. What was the board's rationale in maintaining the current tax rate, keeping it flat? Matt, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Kara. I think we recognize that there have been a much greater need for services because of COVID. And so the original budget had frozen 56 positions. And in part due to the federal legislation, the American Rescue Plan, we had resources to provide more on some of our key issues. And so that really was critical as we were making the decisions on a $1.4 billion budget, but aware that there's still, folks, a stepped up level of need in housing and our small businesses and on a number of our services. Our Department of Human Services has worked so hard this year. So that's what led us to keep that rate flat. And we're mindful that that may mean small increases for some property owners, but we also know that Arlington residents want good housing services, good investments in COVID response. We took $17.5 million and put it into a COVID response contingency that really keeps going on a sort of foundational part of this board's work, which is eviction prevention. We are working to keep everyone in their home during this very difficult time because we're coming out of high levels of infection over the next 3, 5, 7 weeks. I think we're going to be in more and more vaccines, but we still have those COVID budget needs that we have to address on housing, on PPE, on contact tracing in some cases. There's a lot of needs, and that's what led us to say, let's keep the rate flat and invest in our community to bridge from the pandemic and the stability we are working to bring to our community towards the recovery that is so exciting and we're all looking forward to. So I'll just add a little on housing and then I'll pass to you, Libby. We have a lot in this budget, but on housing, I mentioned eviction prevention. We also are investing quite a bit in the housing grants program that serves some of our neediest residents, really mostly those who earn less than $35,000 a year for a household of 3. So we added flexibility to the housing grant program. We slightly decreased the amount from 40% to 30% that households in that program need to contribute because we recognize that there's so much need at this time. So that's housing, and I know there's a number of other items. I mentioned small business, and I know economic recovery is important to you, Libby, and really all of us.
Oh, absolutely. You know, this budget, I think more than most, and I think our residents understood this almost more than most times. It's so clear we have so much increased need, which Matt, you talked about a lot with the housing and everything. And then, but some people are really struggling because they've lost jobs. And so in some ways it's harder for people to pay the taxes. We are lucky here in that a lot of people in Arlington have jobs that can be done virtually. And that has really helped a certain amount. And I think all of us struggled a little bit wanting to lower the tax rate, knowing that some people were having a really hard time, but yet realizing that there are other folks who it was really kind of existential. They needed housing and they needed food. So we do have, which we talked about a lot the last budget cycle that we went through, which was that we have these programs to help people if they are having trouble paying their taxes, and you can talk to the treasurer so that, you know, kind of where we came down was we got to help people that really need help. And if folks are having trouble with their taxes, there are some programs, and anybody listening who's, having difficulty paying the taxes should let us know. And then Matt, as you mentioned, yeah, economic recovery for our small businesses. I mean, those are the folks that are really struggling and having a hard time. We did set aside some more funding for the grant program, which we did last year. That was like a complete quick pivot to help our small businesses. And what we heard from small businesses was that actually loans, because of where they're at and the troubles they're having, you've got a small business, a loan is not that great because they just can't take on that much debt because they don't think they may never be able to pay it back. And actually a grant program to help get them through is what helps. And obviously, Matt, as you mentioned, the American Rescue Act has really helped a lot in that area. So that's another one. And then of course, we had some other big issues that we're talking about too. So I'm sure, Kara, you've got some questions about those too.
Sure. Well, Libby, you touched on the economic recovery angle with, of course, the new allocation for our small business community. But let's talk about a little more of the items that are included under that American Rescue Plan. For those who aren't aware, that is the federal relief plan. And it's really giving the county a chance to expand its horizons a little bit and look at some of the things we really need to do to move into the future. As Matt, as you said, kind of create that bridge into an era of recovery. One thing that was a big part of that is the investments made for climate change. Libby, do you want to give us an update on that?
Sure. We put a lot. I think everybody knows climate change is an issue. We still remember that storm of July 19, I think it was. So we all feel the need to kind of help the globe and help ourselves locally. So on the larger kind of picture, we put in some more money, actually, which the American Rescue Act helped. So with 13 charging stations for electric vehicles, just to get more. I think we don't see that many electric vehicles, but we all kind of know they're coming, and I think they're going to come fast, and we've got to be able to charge them. And that's just another way to kind of help. It's a kind of a real chicken and egg issue with electric vehicles. You can't get the vehicles if you can't charge, but you don't want to charge if you haven't got the vehicles. So we're kind of starting it up with jump-starting it with no pun intended with the charging. And then of course we also put in a little extra money to kind of put in some extra funds to buy more electric vehicles for our own fleet, which I think is important. And we've heard from particularly our C2E2 Commission that a real desire to make sure we have a whole of government approach, which I think we're working on, but we kind of made that explicit. And directed the manager to sort of go into a whole of government approach to looking at climate change and sustainability, because it's a full court press. Everybody is kind of on board then. And we did increase a dedicated stormwater tax, which we hadn't done in a long time, to help handle stormwater. So I don't know, over to you, Matt. I think there's a lot of stuff we've been doing with stormwater, both, currently and moving forward. And this budget just kind of helped continue the foundation to keep that work moving forward.
Yes, it sure did. And I think given the storm of July 2019, we knew this was a priority. We've done some bond funding, but the investment in the slight increase for the first time in a long time in the stormwater rate is part of addressing this need that really has come up in part because of climate change, but also because of decisions made sort of 50 years ago. But we
actually, I think 80 years ago.
Yeah. So we had investment also in the police practices group. We put over about 1.5 million in additional funding there. We also are going to hire an auditor monitor as part of our implementation of the suggestions and recommendations that our police practices group did. There's 6 unsworn officers for parking enforcement, traffic direction, and safety, which is an initiative that the manager and I think all of us are very appreciative of. I just think it's important to kind of close with context on our county employees. We have invested there, and if you think about it, there's Department of Parks and Recreation individuals who have been taking phone calls for months now about COVID. Everybody has been asked to continue to do what's necessary for the current work, but also switch and change and do additional duties as assigned, as the saying goes, and that has really strained our workforce, and our public health, our public safety have been asked to do so much. So we increased by 1%. We were able to do that for salaries over the next year. That's fiscally responsible, but we also had one-time funding that we were able to invest, and that led to a one-time net bonus of $900, which, if you think about everything our employees have been doing, we feel and felt was the right approach. Lastly, there's for equity, we increased slightly from $15 to $17 per hour. Those in the salaries for those at the bottom area of our compensation. So it's a budget that includes investments in equity. It's a budget that is fiscally wise, given we all may want to be done with COVID, but there's economic impacts that are still with us. And so we have to bridge to that next stage. So that's where we are.
Yeah.
And to kind of wrap up there, well, I mean, as we kind of move slowly out of the emergency mode generated by the pandemic, we all maybe remember last year, the manager had to come back several times because there were so many unexpected expenses, or more like lack of revenue coming in. Do we expect some of the same kinds of budget modifications that we experienced last year, or will we start to see things more normal, so to speak?
Normal, with fingers crossed, I think. But you know, I was really struck, you know, looking at this and listening to you, Matt, as we're having this discussion. This budget, more than most, to me, just shows the big issues, show the complexity of local government and what we're dealing with. So you've got police practices group, and that's really a cultural change that we're working on. And not that, I mean, I think our police are very good, very professional, and we're far down the road to moving into 21st century policing, which, you know, we don't need to have police for traffic stops. We need to have a mental health crisis unit. You know, we're really moving into that area. We had a good foundation to do it, but that's really a cultural shift. And then you've got real literal nuts and bolts when you're talking about stormwater, because, you know, it's not only trees and things that are important, it's the pipes, it's the cisterns that we have to build to hold and retain the water. So it's a really major a major combination of both cultural shifts that we're going through and physical shifts. And this budget kind of carries it all. And our employees are the ones who have to make it happen. And then, Matt, as you talked about, I mean, it's just been incredible the way they have been changing and adapting. And we had hoped to do more for our employees this time, and hopefully more going forward. But yeah, Cara, hopefully we're going to get to a nice, steady, even kind of time next time. But these last 2 budget years have been pretty amazing. I've been doing a lot of budgets, I think 24 or 5 of them. It's never been like this before.
I was going to say, it's an era I think we will all be grateful to move out of in the coming months.
Yeah.
So,
and hopefully this sets a foundation for being at a better place when we come out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break. Of course, there are quite a few other issues that came before the board this month. We'll take a look at some of those, as well as get an update on COVID vaccinations when we come right back.